You know you're in Melbourne when it's freezing.
I'm sure it's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Hang on a minute. Yeah. Look at this guy.
That's it.
What's going on? It's very dark in this engine bay.
We should push the car back.
They'll push it back. All right. Look, it's Mez again. Look, he's got a beard now.
Yeah.
It's only been 2 days.
It's magic of being Lebanese. You just...
All right, it's back in Melbourne. Car's here. This legend here has tuned it. Look at this. Hang on, we've got to get the hoodie in there. You can also own one of these. You just have to contact All Trade. There's a Mustang there on the hoodie, and there's a Mustang there. But hang on a minute. So anyway, yeah, the car's done. There's a couple more things I want to finish on it, which one of them includes putting the turbo rotors on the front and the brake caliper brackets to match that. Got all them ready to go. Other than that, Mez, how do you reckon we've gone? It's all come up pretty good?
Yeah, well, now that we've got the intercooler pipe on there,
yes.
so it's has some boost finally.
Yep. Yep. But no, it's all in. Everything's running. Brett's tuned it. Thankfully, Brett's probably loving the fact that I wasn't here bugging him while we were tuning it. So.
Absolutely.
So no, the main reason is we are going to talk about the Haltech. So a lot of secret squirrel stuff here in his laptop, but
no secret squirrels.
Look at that, perfectly framed up with a Haltech banner on the wall in the background. And lots of barrows here. So this is getting a barrow now. I'm just going to quickly show the Mustang for 1 second. It does have a barrow in it, and it may be billet. But anyway, so my main question to you is that we had 3 options as far as this car goes. One was to like flash the NA ECU, go to a turbo ECU, and several flashing options, which all work well. But with the plans for this car and the versatility of the Haltech, what does that offer us over the other options?
Well, I suppose it's future-proof for, you know, if you want to go big power and a bigger setup. It gives you some inputs and outputs that you don't have the, you know, the option for with just a factory ECU and a PCM tech sort of tune. And the safety side of things, once you go and spend some money on an engine, you know, we've got engine protection set up over fuel pressure differential, oil pressure, wideband. So, and you can have it pretty much set up over anything you like, coolant temperature. So that when you do have a, you know, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 engine in there, you're able to look after your investment at least when it has an issue. So that's probably the main benefit going to the Haltech. It does the same job a factory ECU does, it just does it better, and it has some extra features that just sort of look after you. As everyone knows, you spend a fair bit of money when you go down this track, and when you do that, you've got safety features that you simply can't have with a factory ECU. So that's probably the biggest benefit. You know, live tunability as opposed to flash tunability, and you know, O2 control, you know, long-term fuel trim, all that type of stuff is great, and it's something that you can't do with a factory ECU. So they're all benefits. At the end of the day, it runs the engine no differently than the factory engine ECU does. It just gives you more tunability, and safety features is probably the biggest.
All right, so talk me through so I left the car with you and said, look, just do what you need to do. You set up the GoPro. I don't even know what you've recorded yet, but talk me through what did you need to do to actually get this thing from just a base map in it to a good running driving car?
So there's a few things we do. With a plug-and-play ECU for a barrow, it's fairly basic because most of this stuff is in there for you. You essentially need to select the can type and the vehicle type, and that sort of gets you going. Fuel maps and stuff that are in these ECUs are fairly close for a pump fuel car, but you go through all this stuff and check it out anyway. We set up all the sensors, so this car has got a couple of extra sensors. They're all set up in there, oil pressure, things like that, and that allows us to do engine protection. And probably one of the main things is, although we have wideband O2 control, we turn that off. And we turn that off until we've tuned the VE table. And once the fuel table's tuned, and within, you know, 1%, 2% of the target, then basically the O2 sensor and the ECU have got a much smaller job to correct the target, and that's your target lambda table. So this table here basically tells the ECU what lambda value you want to see at a given boost level. This guy's a little bit on the rich side on boost to try and keep things together, being in a turbo thing, but nothing crazy. And that lambda target table then is what we would tune this base VE fuel table from. And this base VE fuel table here is essentially airflow through the engine, and that's how the ECU calculates the amount of fuel it needs at a given load cell. Then once we've tuned that table, we'll go and turn on the O2 control so that we can use the the O2 control or the wideband controller, pretty much a must. You can order these ECUs without it, but I never have, to be honest. You'd always run the wideband, and that way, once it's tuned and dialed in, you dial it in without the O2 sensor going. Couple of reasons. One, makes the fuel table much more accurate, and if the sensor ever has a failure or anything like that, you're not relying on the sensor. You can rely on the sensor. It will do its job fairly well, but it's not ideal. So once we get that VE table tuned, we'll turn the O2 control back on and then basically go back through our tuning again and check our load cells and do some driving on the road as well, because it does differ from the dyno, and just basically verify that our target lambda table and our actual lambda reading is correct. And then during that process, when you're first setting it up, we're also doing ignition tuning in there as well. There's a fair bit to the ignition tuning, but the crux of it is the base table here, which is essentially timing over map reference from vacuum all the way into boost. Yeah, and then there's a whole heap of other setup, transmission stuff. There's some secret sauce stuff in there to make the ZF work, and the other side of the ZF is actually tuned in the TCM with PCM Tech. So I do a PCM Tech tune on the TCM, and then some of the torque reduction stuff and engine side of things to keep the auto happy during a shift is done inside the Haltech.
Right, so, well, before we go on to that, so what would a standard NA Barra, like stock everything, make on the dyno?
Once it's tuned, 160.
No, like it's straight out of, like, not even touching it, just putting it on the dyno.
FG Auto, like 150 to 165 kilowatts, depending on the car.
Which is actually...
wheel size and...
I can give you that exact number if you go to the Barrel of the World YouTube and watch our NAT build. No. We ran it up on a hub dyno at Checker Tuning, made 142 kilowatts on the hub.
Yep.
Through the Z.
So 140, 160, which is actually pretty good for a standard road car non-turbo.
Depends on the car, wheel size, dyno.
Yeah, hubs, rollers, yeah.
Yeah, no one cares, but yeah, about that much. And we finished up 335 kilowatts. 792 newton meters. So
and yeah, there's always going to be conflicting arguments. People going, "Oh, that dyno's, blah blah blah." It's like, who cares? It's a dyno. It made power. But so,
pretty
torque-wise, what are we looking at there as an increase from standard?
Oh, well over double.
Yeah.
Realistically, yeah.
Yeah, which is pretty good. Should spin in a second. Yeah,
absolutely, it does. The dyno argument too. If you go to the track with that and it runs the mile an hour it should, which generally most of the cars that come out of here, if they come off our dyno, it's been pretty accurate. If they make, 450, 480 kilowatts, they go 135, 138 mile an hour. So you'd imagine it's pretty close. It's about what they should run at their weight. So, at the end of the day, it's a tuning tool. We don't really care what the number is, but it's cool to show your mates, I suppose. Everyone likes a dyno sheet.
So what is in here that makes this the safest option?
So a couple of things you can do in here that you can't do in a factory ECU. One of the main benefits of the Haltech is obviously being able to do engine protection over any which sensor that you like, really. In this car, we've got it set up over a few sensors. So fuel pressure is probably a good one to show. Fuel pressure sensor, we do that over a fuel pressure differential. So that's the ECU calculating from base fuel pressure, which is input into the software and the fuel setup, what the fuel pressure differential is or what it should be at a given point. So it's base fuel pressure plus obviously with a rising rate fuel pressure regulator, as the boost increases, then obviously the fuel pressure's got to increase as well. So that if the ECU knows what the fuel pressure differential should be at base, then it knows what it should be through all the boost levels. So if we're at 20 pounds of boost, for example, which we're not, but if we were at 20 pounds of boost and for some reason we lost a pump or we lost some voltage to a pump and the fuel system slowed down, we got fuel surge and the fuel pressure dropped off and it dropped under the threshold, under that fuel pressure differential, then you can set it up to do whatever you like. It can be as aggressive as completely shut the engine off, set a rev limiter, close the throttle. You can basically set it up over anything that you like. So something like this, where if we saw a really, really lean spot on power, we'd probably like it to kill the engine before the engine actually fails or melts. So we normally would set this type of engine protection up in a similar way we would for oil pressure. So if it saw not enough oil pressure for a given amount of time, then it would just shut the engine off to try and minimise the damage as much as possible, which is what we've done here. So,
and I'm not really zooming in on the screen here because it's just like small writing and numbers.
Yeah.
And most of this stuff you could probably see on the Haltech YouTube channel because they've got a pretty decent YouTube channel. But so that's one of them. Oil pressure as well.
Yep, oil pressure is done in the same way.
Yep.
And the oil pressure is done so that it kills the engine.
Yep.
So if it gets to a point where it loses oil pressure below a certain point and it's above a certain RPM or a certain amount of throttle, then we definitely want it to just turn the engine off. You wouldn't set that up for something like low throttle, cruising around, because it could be dangerous on the road. You would hate to, if the car loses oil pressure midway across an intersection, you'd rather drive it across the other side of the intersection with no oil pressure and then switch it off than have it stop in the middle of an intersection and get hit by a car. So there is parameters in there to basically set it up any which way you like. You've got to sort of use your brain a little bit when you're setting that type of thing up. It just gives you the benefit of saving the engine. With an NA engine like this, there's not a whole lot of money involved. There's a lot of effort involved, but if it failed, it's not a big deal. But when you go down the track of building an engine later on and spending some money in there, you definitely want this stuff to try and minimise the damage as much as possible.
I mean, even now, like we're at Nexus and Elite levels with these ECUs. The one thing for me when we first got my drag car running was the remote login factor. And the guy that wired it up couldn't get it running, so we got Scott Hilsinger on the phone. He remote logged in and got it running from Sydney from his desk.
You get in the nuts and just see what happens and
Righty.
Gets a bit cleaner.
So that's where, like, this car with what's hopefully happening with it in the near future is whether or not I'm there and I've got the laptop and there's any questions to be asked, we can just ring you and then...
Yeah, we can just log in and
look at things both sides,
I do it for, not so much for the drag racing customers that I do, because I'm usually at the track with those guys, but speedway guys, where they're off racing all around the country, I'll quite often get a phone call and just have to log in and have a look or check a data log for them and see if we can find an issue at the time. The other benefit is to the Haltech, not so much on this platform, but on the Nexus, it's wireless connection, so we don't have to be sitting in the car. I can actually be on the laptop when the car's coming up the return road, and if I can get a connection onto the car, I can see what it's doing long before it even gets back to the pits. So you can even do that on the start line and all that type of stuff. So huge benefits to the Haltech platform, over the factory ECU. The factory ECU tuning with PCM tech has come a long, long way from SCT days, when we were using the old flash boxes and stuff like that. It's come such a long way that it is quite a good platform, but this is just the next step. And in my opinion, if you're going to go a built engine and a built trans and all that type of stuff and spend some money on the car, then this is sort of it's really a no-brainer. It just protects your investment in the long run. And you can if you've got great data logging capability and the chance to add safeties in, which, at the end of the day, who doesn't want to save a bit of money when things go wrong? So
and the fact that it's virtually a plug-in bolt-in.
Absolutely. It's as easy as it gets. You plug it in, it's only Mark 1 FG that you have to plug another cable in to program the radio, which it does for you. It's all automatic. But other than that, it's basically go through the vehicle setup and it will prompt you with little errors up here that will tell you, go to this menu, this is wrong, change that, this is wrong. And you just go through and tell it which car it is, which CAN system it is, whether it's auto, manual, turbo, FG Mark 1, FG Mark 2. And it's basically to the point then where even without setting everything up, you can turn the key and it will start and run. So for a home install point of view as well, if you've got a little bit of knowledge about this stuff, or you watch a YouTube video and go through this stuff and understand how to do the basic setup, you can turnkey this at home. There's no reason you need a tuner to set this up.
Oh, and I mean, Mez was there. Like, this thing literally started first fire up,
Yeah. Mitch Bakulek obviously went through here and just did a basic setup and put the injector data and stuff in and set up his sensors and allocated his wires to that. and he got it running, and it was, it was running pretty well, to be honest. Injector data was pretty close, and it was all pretty good. That's another thing we should touch on, I suppose. How simple it is to add a sensor in the Haltech, and how simple it is to see where the wiring's going. So there's not necessarily allocated wires for specific sensors like there was with ECUs back in the day. You can essentially pick any, voltage output or input for sensors or controllers, and you can simply turn a sensor on in the menu, and then you'll go into that sensor. It gives you a wiring tab. You go into the wiring tab, and it tells you what wire is allocated to that wire. If there's not a wire allocated to it, or if you'd like to change it, you just click assign, and it gives you a list of available inputs that you can select to control whatever you're trying to control. You can also change the pull-up resistor on that particular output, so whether it requires a pull-up or not, and it's just a drop-down menu, click and select it. It's as simple as it gets. And if you're wiring the car up, before you even start the car or even start to wire anything up, you can actually allocate all this stuff in the software, and you can go into the wiring tab up here, and it will give you a list of everything that you've allocated, what the sensor is, what wire it's outputted to, the pin number, the color of the wire, and you can then print that, and that is essentially your wiring diagram to wire up the car. So not that there's much to wire on one of these cars, one of these plug-and-play ECUs, but if you're doing something like a Nexus where everything's wired from scratch in a race car, this allows you to essentially wire the car on the computer, click print, and basically just put the wires where it tells you. That's as simple as it gets.
Well, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
My main question is how soon until I can film that?
When I get a heap of spare time and do sort of the last bits and pieces to get it together. Engines.
Well, I'm keeping this white here, but that is a very sexy looking car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit grubby, but we'll get there.
Oh, it's in the workshop, so.
Yeah, we're getting close. Engine's all done and ready to go together. Mark Mickey 3-speed's ready to go in the car. It's all here. Billet 2-piece converters here. Everything's here. I've got everything from the gearbox back. So next is pretty much plumb and wire the car. But one day when we get a bit of spare time, we'll finish it off.
Oh, I can't wait to see it go. Looks pretty good. All right, well, it's freezing and it's late, so we should pack up. But thank you very much.
No worries.
You're a legend. A barra legend. I suppose I should do a walk around as well while we're here, because I didn't really get many shots of it completed with the wheels on it. It was sort of just getting put on the trailer and taken away. So very happy with those wheels. They look awesome. They suit the car. Black on silver looks good. And considering it's still standard ride height, I think it sits quite nicely.
It's done. All in one weekend.
Yes, that was genuinely a very impressive weekend by all to get that done and to have it looking that neat as well.
We actually would have been driving that weekend.
Yes, yeah. Either way, anyway, it's getting late. We're going to film a bit more tomorrow, so see you later.
So essentially these two are both NA plus T. They are the same internals. Mark did a pretty job of painting this rocker cover.